And get started. I am going to ask all of our panelists to just do a quick introduction of themselves, about 1 minute each, and then we'll come back to the conversation. So, David Haas, could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thank you, Lynn. And thank you, Gene, for putting this together. So my name is David Haas. I'm a certified financial planner. My business is in Franklin Lakes, New Jersey, Cirrus Financial Advisors. I work with small business people, professionals, executives on their personal financial issues, retirement planning, college planning, and investment management, including in retirement plans. And I normally don't directly advise the business part of my clients, but everything is sort of put together here nowadays. Many people there who have small businesses, they are you can't easily separate the personal and the business. So so I have to be try to be an expert on both. And I've been a TAB member for quite a few years. I don't know how many years.
I think 4 at least, anyway. Thank you, David. Frank, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning, or I guess good afternoon, and thanks everyone for joining, and Lynn and Gene for hosting. My name is Frank Turner. My firm is Interpeak Consulting. We help company owners from losing their business. Many of our clients come to us because they have anxieties about the future of their business. They're concerned about meeting current and future financial obligations, and they're really uncertain about kind of what steps they should be taking. So what we do is we develop a turnaround strategy, both on the operational and financial side. We come up with a plan. We help them negotiate with their creditors, vendors, and other important stakeholders, and hopefully find a resolution to give the company more runway. We focus exclusively on the small to medium-sized businesses to help them in those difficult times. So I posted my information in the chat room, and thanks again for everyone for joining.
Thank you, Frank. Is Tom here, Gene? I don't see him on the screen.
I just got a message from him. He had an emergency at home and is not able to make it.
Okay.
So we'll have to.
All right. So we'll go ahead without him. So I'm going to ask our 3 panelists now, since we don't have 4 of them. I'm going to ask our 3 panelists to just give us a quick summary overview of what is in this new bill and what you think we all need to know about. I think I'll start with you, David. Obviously, you can't go over the entire bill, but you need to unmute. You're muted. David, you're muted.
Sorry. This bill had so much in it. We're still unpacking it, and it was a lot of I had a lot of trouble getting a good summary. So actually, I created one, which I'd be happy to share with everyone later, and I'm going to read off a little bit of it. So specifically for businesses, they are reopening the PPP loans for those businesses that have not yet received one. One big change is that there was a lot of sort of muddled message about taxes and the PPP loans, and this new bill, the CAA, has specifically said now that any expenses that are paid with the PPP loan, and the PPP loan is forgiven, those expenses are still deductible for tax purposes. So that is a change. In fact, while I was waiting to start this, I'm on the IRS's mailing list, and I saw that they just rescinded their previous advice about deductibility because of this new law.
Great.
So they're still writing the rules.
Okay. Thanks, David, for that quick summary. Frank, oh, actually, I'm going to have Tom. I saw that Tom just joined us. Tom, could you just introduce yourself really quickly, please? Give us a 1-minute overview of you. And are you there? 'Cause you're muted.
Yes, hey,
You are.
Tom Owens speaking. I'm a practicing CPA. My focus is servicing small to medium-sized businesses. Hey, it's been a wild time. And the wildness just continues. So, you know,
So
that's
Tom,
kind of,
what do you think? Give us a real quick summary of the things you saw in the new bill and the things you think everybody really needs to hear about.
well, so a couple of key items. I don't know what was shared earlier, but so a couple of items would be, number one, you can apparently use 2019 or 2020 payroll. I know from a source from this morning that the SBA will be finalizing the package sometime later today. That'll be kind of fun. Number two is you get to add more items, such as anything you spent on PPE, equipment, mask, what have you, that will be added to the funding formula. I don't know the full formula at the moment. I think everybody needs to work off their original formula that they have from PPP1. And there'll be a couple of add-ons such as the PPE equipment. There's some other incidentals, but I don't have the full picture at the moment.
Okay.
But it'll be richer, is my comment. And
All
I
right.
think you still have the 8 and 24-week pay formula to use. A lot of the elements are the same, and there'll just be a couple of added features.
Okay, great. Frank, tell us what you saw in the bill and what you think we all should hear about.
But one of the things that we've been talking about the last number of sessions was, waiting before you filed the forgiveness, as we expected that process would change, and it clearly was in this bill. So it's for loans of 150,000 or less, it's a simple one-page certification that the borrower submits to the lender. The legislation is very specific that the SBA must keep it to one page. The information is very basic. It just you represent that you've hired back a certain number of employees and that you used the money from the loan to pay at least 60% on payroll. There is some documentation required for that, but it's not nearly as extensive as what was in, let's say, the CARES Act. So the SBA is to submit the one-page application no later than January 20th of this year, and sound like maybe it's coming a little bit sooner. So that would be something for people to be on the lookout for, because it's a simple form, as Gene, I think, had mentioned. We were expecting it, but it really is coming as delivered. And then we can talk later about some of the other, there are a lot more costs that are covered, for that remaining 40%. In particular, even capital expenditures that you had to expend if you were increasing outdoor space or even enhancing a drive-through window. It's much more inclusive than what was in earlier. And what's also important, all of those things are retroactive to the CARES Act, in effect. So if you hadn't taken out a PPP loan, those enhancements are part of as if they were in the original bill itself. So some very, very good things in the bill.
Great. I'm going to come back to you in a minute, David. Gene, did you have something you wanted to add right now?
Well, no, just one thing that is important to note is that there is a second round of PPP money available to those who got it the first time. There is a condition for it in that one of the quarters you have to demonstrate that your sales were off 25% or more. If that is the case, then you're able to get a second round of PPP, and presumably that's through your existing bank that you got the first round through. I think it's important that you do your own sales analysis in your business and find the quarter where your sales were down 25% or more. If you have that condition, then you can get a second round for yourself, and you should elect to take it. And of course, just as important, there's a lot of people that I spoke with that never applied in the first place for PPP. A lot of people that I'm talking to still didn't think it applied to them, people who were solopreneurs, people who didn't have employees. And it's important to note that if you don't have employees, you still are eligible for a PPP if you are a business owner. So that means if you missed it the last time around, you can get it this time. One thing that isn't clear to me is whether you can get it twice right out the bat, whether you can qualify for two PPPs. But it's important. I think as a tab coach, I've always made sure that everybody who thinks they're eligible takes out the maximum amount that you can, because we still don't know where we're headed, right? We all thought this was going to be over in 8 weeks or 12 weeks, and here we are, 8 months later, 9 months later, and we're still in it. So,
Yeah, Gene, just from my reading of the bill, you can definitely have two of the loans out. The first one doesn't have to be forgiven before you can take the second one out. The bill's pretty clear on that, and it's also very clear that the 150,000 or below simple certification applies for both the original PPP loan as well as the second one. So,
Although,
David, you had something to say?
well, actually on that, I was just going to mention, you can't double dip on the expenses though. So although you could take a second loan out,
Right.
you cannot use the same expenses for forgiveness on any of these programs. So there's multiple programs, and you have to you're only allowed to use the expenses for one program at a time. I was also going to mention a couple of other things. So they've actually opened up they will open up the EIDL grant program again. But that is more restrictive. So it's business owners who are located in a low income community and have suffered an economic loss greater than 30% and employ less than 300 employees. But they could get an EIDL grant. There's also an enhanced employee retention credit. Previously, so there was an employee retention credit program that was part of the original CARES Act for 2020. And that still exists, but that was a little bit more limited. So most employers, I think, tried to get the PPP, but they've really loosened up the employee retention credit for 2021, and that's good for the first half of the year. The tax credit was increased to 70%. You can get a tax credit of $10,000 per quarter per employee. So in the old program, you had to have a 50% reduction in revenue, but for the new program, it's a 20% reduction in revenue on a per quarter basis. So it's definitely something to look at as a possibility. And there's more. If you have a venue that sells tickets for live performances or a museum, there are shuttered venue grants. This is brand new in the bill. The live venue part and selling tickets has to be the primary part of your business. So it can't be incidental. So it's not meant for a restaurant that has a stage, or a mic in the corner. It's really meant for movie theaters and concert venues where that's the primary purpose. But that grant is definitely something to look into. They're significant grants. You have to have had at least a 25% revenue reduction for a given quarter in 2020 versus 2019. And if you had stopped operations, you have to have restarted them.
Okay. I have a couple questions related to what we were just talking about. They want to clarify, in order to qualify for a second round of PPP, you need to show that you're down in any quarter compared to 2020 or 2019, comparing 2020 to 2019. Is that correct? Any quarter?
Yeah, any quarter, first, second, third, or even the fourth quarter. So you just need to compare 20 to 19. So I had a client that first half of the year, he was only down, 10, 15%. Then the third quarter, he was down 83%. So
I will point out for the employee retention credit, if that's an option, you're actually allowed to compare the current quarter with the previous quarter, or you can compare the quarter to the quarter last year.
and then there's also a lot of exceptions. If, let's say, your business wasn't open in 2019, but it was open before, I think it's February 15th of 20, that they allow you to look at, quarter by quarter as you go into 20. So there's a lot of, detail in terms of how you can calculate that based off when the business was operating.
Would one of you please just do a quick summary of the changes in forgiveness for where we're at now, and particularly for sole proprietorships? The forgiveness rules? Yeah.
I think, the major change in forgiveness for the small companies are the fact that there's going to be this easy form. They're not going to require any proof. So you, if your loan is below $150,000, there's going to be a one-page form. The act said it had to be one page. I don't know if it specified the font. And it specified that there did not have to be any supporting documentation required. So all you have to do is attest to the facts in the form. So that's a major change. And then they did allow these additional categories of expenses, although it's still a 60-40 mix. So 60% has to be payroll, 40% are other expenses. They've added some other expenses, which include the PPE expenditures. It includes business software or cloud services. I think the idea is if you had to go online because of COVID, where before you didn't, and you had all these new expenses, those are now allowed. Property damage, if your property was damaged, this is related to vandalism and looting during the public disturbances, that's covered, and covered supplier costs, which I think is basically any supplier costs, the way I read it, although I think, we have to wait to really know what the forms are going to say.
Tom, I just want to ask you if you would, from your perspective, what are the changes here? What are the things we need to watch out for?
Building off what Frank and David talked about, the payroll is, it's primarily payroll. It has to represent 60% of your cost. Rent is still part of the feature. Benefits is still part of the feature, meaning dental health kind of programs, PPE equipment that David is just talking about, all the things that you had to do to modify yourself in order to survive, such as software, operating from home offices, what have you. I'm trying to think of other features I've read. At the moment, I haven't had the time to address all of this because my world is a world of panic at this time of the year between tax planning through 12/31 and then trying to finish up a little bit of that. So I apologize. Sorry that I have to say that, but so I haven't had the time to devote to understanding the full bill, but there are enhancements like everybody's talking about.
All right. Let's go ahead and start. Jane, did you have one other comment before we start answering questions?
I was just going to ask Tom or the others if they got started in actually applying for forgiveness for any of their clients.
Yeah, so so you can start doing a preliminary upload. So I've started a few of those at the moment, but I'm reluctant to kind of do that because I want to see what the Excel worksheet that different sources will prepare that we have to design the formula around. So there's, look, everybody wants to be first on the list. I've got like 50 people telling me, Tom, I'm going to be first on the list. Until I see an Excel worksheet and the full formula, I'm reluctant to commit to the anxiousness that's out there. I realize it's a 3-month window till March 31st, but I like to get it complete and right and as much money possible for each person.
All right. Thank you.
I've certainly been telling people to delay up until now, and I would certainly probably delay, you know, a couple more weeks until some of these rules are written and the forms are out there, and then look at it. Particularly if your loan is under $150,000, you know, wait for that new form. Your bank is going to tell you, because you do have to apply for forgiveness through the bank. And once you're in that position, then it's probably fine to go ahead.
All
Let me
right.
just add a comment or two to what everybody's sharing here. Everybody has to understand, number one, we've been through this drill. We did the PPP 1, let's call it. Number 2 is I advise everybody to use the original funding source that they were successful with originally. It's an easier reference point. And to David's point, let's wait until a lot of things are ironed out, feeding off his comments. We don't know all of it until usually a week or two later, because there's often changes. If you remember the original EIDL and PPP, they were changing it on the fly, like they were building the plane and they were flying the plane, but they were building the plane while it was in air. So let's keep in mind what we experienced back in March, April, May, June, and keeping it all in context. My argument is that the money is not going to run out, in 15 days, but let's get it right and let's get you the maximum amount of money that's available. And I'm convinced that there's going to be more money for each person if it's done correctly.
Yeah, I would agree with Tom's comment. I think the focus should be, to the extent that you can demonstrate the revenue reduction, first focus on getting the additional money, and then secondary on the forgiveness. The other thing, to Tom's point as well, I don't think we're going to have the rush in terms of the money running out like we did last time, primarily because they've lowered the threshold. The number of employees now is 300, not 500. And the maximum loan amount is 2 million, not 10. So I think, it's really targeted for the smaller businesses. So I would, first focus on getting the second PPP loan. And then, as both David and Thomas said, wait until more documentation comes out from your provider around the forgiveness.
All right,
So
let's
you're
go ahead and
saying-
answer some questions.
So I want to clarify that because this is an important thing to consider. That means you're suggesting that even if you did not have a revenue reduction of 25% or more in a quarter, are you suggesting that people take the second PPP loan out anyway?
No, I didn't. If that came across, that was not. No, it has to have the 25% reduction.
But I mean, but you could that if you took it out and you didn't have the reduction, does anyone know what those repercussions would be? I'm just trying to talk that out.
If you, let's say, had not taken a PPP loan at all, you could still apply for one without the 25% reduction. It's only for the second PPP loan that you'd have to show the 25%. You could also have more than 300 employees, and you could take out, up to 10 million of the loan.
So, that the window for that is not quite open yet. And I'm going to guess that they're going to ask for some kind of documentation on the, certainly an attestation, but possibly some documentation on the reduction, because it just makes sense that they should.
All right, let's answer some of the questions we have here. Must the forgiveness form come from the lender? And where do we send it?
The forgiveness form is the same form, so it will be the SBA form, but you're going to file it through the lender and probably through an online portal.
Okay. And you said that the filing date for this new round is March what?
It's listed as March 31st is when it stops.
Okay,
Yeah, I seem to remember that as well.
okay. The January 20th date that you mentioned earlier, what is that date? What does it represent?
That's when the SBA needs to submit its one-page forgiveness forms for loans of 150,000 or less for lenders then, and as well as rather borrowers to use to submit for their forgiveness. It's just that, so the SBA under the bill is required to submit that one-page form within 20 days of the enactment of the act.
Okay,
So
so
my
so-
point to bring it out is simply to wait. It's on its way. It should be out by no later than January 20th.
Yeah, I would
So-
use the word issue rather than submit. The SBA has to issue the form.
okay. So no one has to actually fill anything out by January 20th. That's really the first date that you even could fill it out, correct?
Could. And again, the lenders themselves are going to need to understand the form and then put it on their portals and have all the stuff online. So the anticipation would be people would be submitting their forgiveness using, for loans 150,000 or less until a couple, weeks after the January 20th date.
So Beth, you asked, can you get PPP and employee retention credit? Can you just elaborate on that question a little bit? I'm not exactly sure what you're asking there. You're muted.
So based on our revenues, we definitely qualify for a second PPP. We have a 25% reduction in actually every quarter, unfortunately. But anyway, so what I wanted to know is, but we've kept our employees. And so can we apply for an employee retention credit and also get a second PPP? Or is one mutually exclusive of the other?
I believe the answer to that is yes, you can actually do both, but you can't use the same payroll for forgiveness of the PPP that you're using for the employee retention credit.
Okay. All right. I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. Although I did, in reading the bill, there was a paragraph that was very clear that if you're taking the credit, you can have the loan. So it was either one or the other, but
Okay.
it's
Probably
fairly
paid.
complicated and a lot of stuff in it. So
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. The PPP loan form 3508S has been out there for months. So now we're confused about this new one. So what is that?
the new form is the one page for loans of 150,000 or less. That was not part of the forgiveness portion of the original CARES Act. So that's what is new. The other forms that have come out, the original forgiveness form, and then there was another one or two others that the SBA issued over the summer, those are still in effect and would apply to any loan. So if you wanted to, you got a loan of 150,000 or less, you could easily submit those forms if you wish. I think the guidance would be you'd want to submit the one-page form. So for loans above 150,000, those other forms are what is available that you would need to use.
Okay, thank you. So does the first PPP loan have to be forgiven before you can apply for the second round?
My reading of the bill is no.
And
Okay, I see
of
Tom
course,
shaking his head.
a PPP loan doesn't have to be forgiven. If you don't qualify for, you qualify for getting the loan and you've got the loan and for some reason you don't qualify for forgiveness, so it's not forgiven, And that has nothing to do with the second round of the PPP. The fact that you got the first loan is just required before you get the second loan.
So what pay period do you use if you already got the first PPP loan? Do you go back to the March 20th or the last payroll of the first loan, or how does that work?
Well, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, the calculation in terms of determining the loan amount, from what I was reading, is very similar, almost identical to the first PPP loan. So you take your average payroll for 2019 or 2020, and then you multiply, that monthly average multiplied by 2.5 times, and then that's your maximum loan amount. Presumably, if you took the loans out in some, depending, when you took the initial loan out, you got either an 18-week or 24-week period. Obviously, payroll cannot, as David mentioned it earlier, you can't, double dip and include, payroll costs and that period for both loans. But presumably, the new loan would cover an 8-week or 24-week period from the time that you get the loan. So let's say you get it February 1st. Well, that would cover payroll costs from February 1st out to March, April, May, depending on what period you use. So you wouldn't be using it from any of the payroll costs from the initial loan.
Yeah. So what the amount that's that the loan is based on when you take out the loan could be the same period for both loans, but the forgiveness amount is based on different payroll periods. And by the way, no matter when you got your original PPP loan, you now can choose either an 8 or 24-week period. That was something new in the CAA.
Okay. They're asking that we touch on the EIDL. I read that everybody who received less than 10,000 per employee grant last year can reapply and get the difference. Is that true, and how do we do that?
I looked, so I had heard something like that as well. And I looked for information in the bill on the EIDL. And the only thing that I found is that you can apply for grants. I am not sure whether if you got a $1,000 grant before and now you can get a $10,000 grant. I'm not positive about that. But there is a restriction that now that the business owner has to be located in a low-income community and have suffered an economic loss greater than 30%, and have less than 300 employees. So the EIDL grant's available, but you still have to meet those criteria. And I'm not sure about reapplying if you've got less than $10,000.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to point out about the EIDL loans, if you receive the loans, I had a number of tab members that used the wrong calculations for cost of goods sold. There's a calculation that they use to determine your loan amount, and they were able to go back to the SBA and submit the new numbers months later and get a recalculated loan amount. In some cases, they got quite a bit more money than they did originally. So if you're in need of additional funds and you think you entered that wrong number, or you need some help in figuring out what should have been put in as cost of goods sold, you might be able to get more money from them. That's one thing that I saw.
There is something. Oh, sorry.
Just quickly, the other thing, I've seen it in the press. Haven't seen it in the bill yet, but to the extent that you did get an EIDL grant, that now no longer is used to reduce the forgiveness amount of your PPP loan. So whereas before, let's say you had a $10,000 PPP loan, you had $1,000 EIDL grant, the most you could get forgiven on the PPP loan would be $9,000. Now, again, from what I've read in the press, it's the full 10,000. You don't have to apply the EIDL grant against your PPP loan forgiveness.
Right, the grant is just forgiven. It's just a grant.
Okay. My understanding was that I could get forgiveness of my loan solely based on payroll expenses. Is the 60% number that's been discussed a minimum or a maximum?
Purely a minimum.
Okay.
If you have, say, 110% of just pure payroll, then you just apply all the payroll. The payroll has to represent a minimum 60% of the funding.
Okay. I don't see that they've fixed the ability to pay suppliers. Is that true?
No, they have. There's a whole provision that allows for supplier cost. So it's added. It's called covered supplier costs, and it says any expenditure made by an entity to a supplier of goods that are needed, that are essential to operate the business, is made pursuant to a contract, order, purchase order, in effect at the time before the covered period, and it also covers some other items. But it's very clear that supplier costs are covered. It's a lot of words to say that, but it seems pretty comprehensive.
So, this is an important point, whether your loan is below 150,000 or above 150,000, because these rules have changed retroactive to 2020. If you have not filed for forgiveness, wait for the new forms, because they're going to have to update the forms, the forgiveness forms, no matter what size loan you got.
And because they're going to do that, those of you wondering about why the bank has cut off your portal for forgiveness, it's because they're going to be changing the forms. For the second round of PPP, do you only qualify if you have if you have 25% less in sales?
Well, the other restrictions are 300 less employees, and they lowered the loan amount to 2 million versus the 10 million.
If PPP hasn't been forgiven, are the expenses related to PPP still deductible?
Yes. Actually, one thing I should point out, which we haven't talked about, when we talk about deductible, we're talking about for federal taxes. It's still not clear about New Jersey. So as of today, with New Jersey law, I believe that the forgivable loan is taxable in New Jersey, and the expenses cannot be deductions. There is a Senate bill, S3234, that's supposed to fix that, but it hasn't even gotten out of committee. Although it is sponsored by both Republicans and Democrats. So I would say it has a good chance, but it's already January. Why on earth wasn't this done?
Okay. I registered the business in 2019 to start operations in early 2020, and obviously the pandemic came. We did start business in some form in May, but not full scale. We didn't get a PPP because we obviously didn't have 2019 loss of revenue to present. Is there a way that we're eligible for the second round?
Sorry, can you read that again?
Essentially, they say they started their business in the beginning of the year and did not apply the first time around because they didn't have any 2019 income to compare to. So there was no loss of revenue from 2019 because there was no revenue because the business was new. So is there any way for them to be eligible at this point?
There is some provision for using an alternative date for new businesses, but I am not totally familiar with that. So you have to look at that. So the answer is yes, maybe.
All right. I received my first PPP in April. Do I need to apply for forgiveness by February 16th, or is it 10 months from the end of the 24-week period during which we use the funds, or is there some other date? Is it now the March date?
It was 10 months from the end of the period. However, I thought that I read somewhere that they've extended it, but I didn't see it. So maybe one of the other folks on the panel saw it.
I hadn't run across it yet. So I
So
think
for now, we're going to assume it's 10 months.
10 months after the 24-week period. So
Okay.
depending on when you got the loan. I've got one client that would put him in April. He got his loan and using the, yeah. So I think you still have some time, but
Does the bank need to send you the form? Or can we just get it from the internet somewhere? Do we know yet the answer to that, since it hasn't been finished?
Well, if it's like the other forms, the SBA will publish the forms, but you file it through the bank and probably not on paper. That, you know, the banks have created, you know, online questionnaires for the form, but the information is supposed to be the same as on the form. So the SBA will publish those.
Yeah, you might want to have a conversation with your bank to find out where they are. I know that, I know one of the banks that I do business with, Investors Bank, they were very slow at getting their software up to speed. So I expect that every bank is going to be handling this differently. And you're going to want to ask them that question to see how they're going to handle forgiveness. I know I've been getting emails from my bank on forgiveness updates, and presumably all the banks are doing that as well, to, you know, in their own fashion.
My bank has not. It's been like a black hole. So I wish they would.
And maybe one piece of advice that we can give is to contact your bank. I mean, if you're looking to get a second round, you're probably going to go through them anyway. They're going to be facilitating those second rounds of loans, and you'll want to find out from them what they're doing.
Len, can we just go back to the question about the eligibility and date of operation?
Yep.
Yeah, the bill does, there's a provision, it's called the clarification of an additional limitation on eligibility. And there's a new section that they added in, and it states requirement for date in operation. And it simply says a business or organization that was not in operation on February 15, 2020 shall not be eligible for a loan under this paragraph, which is the PPP loan. So you need to be in operation on February 15th of 2020 to be eligible.
So if they actually started in operation on January 1st, they would be eligible.
That's right.
And I think that's when the alternative date is used.
Okay. Can we clarify about the payroll expenses still being deductible on 2020 tax filing, even if your loan is forgiven in 2021?
That is correct.
Yes.
If we're given an EIDL advance equal to $1, that says $1 per employee. We have 5 employees and thus are given, I think that's 5,000. What are our EIDL eligibility options for the EIDL in round 2?
Yeah, I think we talked about that.
Okay. Just so you all know, we will stay on. I know our time is up. We had said it would be an hour, but we will stay on to answer everyone's questions if you would like to hang on and stay with us. So for the second PPP, you can only apply if you have 25% less in sales for 1 quarter, question mark. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. We haven't filed for forgiveness yet and did not use the entire loan amount due to old guidelines. New guidelines imply you can apportion money from the first loan according to the new guidelines if the expenses are within our covered period. Can we use the money we didn't use and apportion to those new covered expenses? as long as you maintain the 60/40 requirements?
My understanding is yes, as long as it's within the covered period. Some of the expenses, the payroll expenses, before it only allowed healthcare insurance. Now it allows things like group life insurance, disability insurance, dental and vision to be added. So that could be helpful.
Okay. Is the 300 employees per entity or per common ownership?
I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, I looked in affiliations in the first round. I had a client that had potential. It gets complicated, so you have to really work it through, because there's a certain, depends on cross ownership thresholds of I would say it's 20% to 50% to greater. That then do you pick up other affiliates? The way I've read the bill, and it's the bill itself is amending 3 other acts: the Small Business Administration Act, the CARES Act, and other acts. So it seems to read that the same affiliation rules that would have applied in the first round of the PPP loan still apply in the second, except that the number of employees is now 300 instead of 500. So it's complicated. It's probably the best answer. So it's, really can't answer it in this form.
Can you give us a little bit more detail on the employee retention credit? What is it?
It's a refundable tax credit. And in 2020, it was equal to 50% of qualified wages, which includes health plan expenses that eligible employers pay their employees. The credit is actually against the employer portion of the payroll taxes. And the fact that healthcare expenses are treated like wages, that's retroactive to 2020. And in 2021, they've just, as I said before, they've changed some of the rules on this, so that you're eligible if you have a 20% reduction in revenue. The tax credit is up to $10,000 per quarter per employee, and it's 70% of the payroll. And again, it's against the taxes.
Gene, you had talked about the salary for sole proprietor, how you fill out that form. Can you just address that, please?
Well, the salary for a sole proprietor, your payroll is actually the profit that you had on your 2019 tax return. So the maximum was $100,000 per owner, per employee. And so if you were just a sole proprietor and you made $100,000, you would be eligible for 2.5 times of the monthly profit or monthly salary. They're assuming your profit is your salary.
Okay.
And there was another question as whether a sole proprietor can get an EIDL loan, and I got one for myself. I'm not sure whether those are eligible for people unless they're under the new guidelines. But as a sole proprietor, you were also eligible for those as well.
And I would just add, remember the EIDL loans are, you submit those directly with the SBA. You would not go through a bank for those. Lynn, I would just like to add a couple of other items that may be a little bit off the radar for people, but are important considerations in the new act.
Please do.
One of which, in the original CARES Act, banks, commercial banks, received regulatory relief and accounting relief that postponed how they had to classify trouble credits, bad loans, if you will, which gave a lot of relief to banks to not be aggressive in foreclosing and taking action against borrowers. This act extended those, what's this called, that flexibility. That was going to end on December 31st of 2020. It's been extended to January 1st of 2022. So banks now aren't going to feel the regulatory or the accounting pressures to, let's say, clean up their balance sheets and reporting troubled loans until sometime in 2022. So that gives them more time to work with borrowers that are having financial difficulty. So you should kind of keep that in mind in your discussions if you do have more traditional bank loans in place. The other is interesting provision in the bankruptcy code is small companies in bankruptcy are eligible, and the new act makes it clear, are eligible for PPP loans. So not sure if anyone on this call is in bankruptcy, but it is a tool that for small business owners, let's say needing some cash to finance while they're in bankruptcy, that may be available to them. And that was clarified in the current act. So just kind of things to kind of keep in mind.
Thank you, Frank. Gene, you were talking about the cost of goods sold for people with services on the EIDL loan. Can you just explain what you mean by that? What's included in those costs of goods sold?
Well, the cost of goods sold is strictly the cost of actual goods that you're selling. It doesn't include services or payroll. It doesn't include all of your costs. And this is one of the things that confused a lot of people. They thought putting their costs of goods sold was putting all of their costs, and as a result, they ended up getting a much smaller loan. So it's strictly items that you are reselling, the costs of goods that you are selling, minus any labor or personnel costs.
Okay.
Or rent for that matter, right? I had some person that just put down their profit for the year on their tax return, and that was a mistake. And I mean their cost, their overall sales minus profit as their cost of goods sold, and that was a mistake.
Okay. I have a restaurant. We do not use purchase orders routinely, but just call in food and beverage orders. Are these not, also these are not per contract. Are they still deductible?
As long as they're in the covered period, I don't see why it would make any difference.
It's interesting. They actually, I think, and this was for restaurants, the provision specifically includes perishable goods that were, bought before or during the time of the covered period, with which the covered period for the loans. So that would indicate, if you're buying, food for the restaurant, that would be considered covered supplier cost.
When does the PPP version 2 application window open? When is it available?
So the act required that the SBA, come out with the new guidelines on it, I think within 10 days after the enactment of the act, which was December 27th. So I think that would be technically today, but I think the banks need time to get the forms in their portals up.
Yeah, I think it will very much depend on the banks again. And, some of the same things that happened the last time where some banks only worked with their existing clients and, you had to go outside to other banks. I see no reason why that will have changed. So, you may have to shop around to find a bank that will deal with you.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, I have a client who has, not picking on any particular bank, but Chase Bank, and they were sending information around the forgiveness process. In the email, they made it very clear that while they may be able to help a little bit in terms of preparing the application, that they're not in a position to recommend, which application you submit and how you prepare that. They really were taking a hands-off approach, and they'll help process it, make sure they've got all the information they need to process it. But in terms of if you were looking for Chase to help you actually prepare and decide the forgiveness loan application, seemed to me very clear that they're not going to be in a position to do that.
What documents do you need to show you are less 25% for the new round?
I don't think we know yet.
Okay. All right, I think
That was actually my question. And
Okay.
I found out also that it's like the first time it's an honor system, except that you don't have like a 941 to prove it. And on the bank situation, I deal with Lakeland, and they're only going to be, they got an email, they're only going to be offering second round to their existing customers.
I did receive an email yesterday from an online bank saying that they are offering the second round and go ahead and apply now. So.
But my
Oh,
understanding of the amount of money that is available, they added money to the funds that were left over. If you can remember, the second round of PPP funding was not exhausted. I think there was like 180 billion left, and they added funding to it. So looking at it, I don't think this isn't going to run out. There's going to be ample funding for the second round.
So, be careful of scams, because I saw somebody send me something about pre-registration for PPP round 2. I'm not sure that I would trust that stuff. Really check out who you're sending your information to and make sure it's legitimate.
Ben, could you just come on and go ahead and ask your question, because I want to make sure we get the right answer to the right question here. So just go ahead and ask it. Unmute.
Okay, so yeah, okay. Perhaps I missed it, but I'm just trying to, are there any provisions to use up any of the, I have residual money from 2020 loan, and I didn't use it all for payroll or for expenses. Is there any way to use that in 2021 so that I can get forgiveness for it?
I think I haven't seen anything. Either you use the money in the 8-week period or the 24-week period. Now, what they have done, and it is retroactive as if it occurred in the original CARES Act, they've added more items that you can count as expenses. You're still required to have at least 60% of what you spent on payroll. But if you were, let's say, having trouble with the other 40%, let's say rent and utilities, and any interest on mortgage loans wasn't sufficient to fully cover that 40, there is additional costs that you can include in that other 40%. So maybe that can, get you up to 100% on the forgiveness. But you couldn't, once you're either out of the 8-week period or 24-week period, you can't, look at like another month or two and apply those costs to they have the loan forgiven.
Hey, Frank, this is an interesting question. Let's say that you're a solopreneur and you got a PPP loan, and you, now they're including, well, I guess they were always including healthcare costs. Maybe I'm answering my own question. Never mind.
But actually,
I know the answer. I know the answer. I'm talking myself into a corner.
One question I have that to Ben's question, if you've received a PPP loan, a substantial PPP loan, and you don't have all the expenses there's some you have to be paid back, could you still get a second PPP loan and get a portion of that forgiven as well?
Oh yeah, I think the answer is definitely yes.
I wouldn't say why not. And as we've mentioned on these calls before, and Ben's question, okay, maybe you don't get the loan totally forgiven. It's still a pretty good loan in terms of rates and, terms. So that, I wouldn't, necessarily, as I think we mentioned before, prohibit you from taking on another loan.
Yeah, but the second PPP loan then applies to a second 24-week period, correct?
That's right. So you'd still need to apply the cost with it. So there's still benefit to it.
Right. I mean, so let's say you can only, the point is that let's say you only have, you only get 70% forgiven of the first loan. You can get the second loan and get 70% forgiven of that, and just use part of that to pay back your loan right at the end, at the end, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So I think that
Assuming you meet the requirements, obviously, to apply for the second time around.
as soon as you meet the requirements of one of your quarters sales being down 25%, it only needs to be one quarter, not the whole year.
And one other thing, I mean, there was no change. I know I talked to a couple of folks about this, that you're up to $100,000 per employee, meaning that's about $42K that you could get forgiven for. The business owner was about half that, $20K. There was no change to that, I assume.
Yeah, there's no change to that.
Okay. Can you clarify the healthcare expense?
Healthcare expenses is included in the 60% payroll for, well, by healthcare expense, maybe by clarifying it, what we really mean is, what is it? It's premiums paid for employee health insurance. If you're a solopreneur or an LLC, and if you're a solopreneur and the healthcare expense, you're not W-2'd, the healthcare expense is not held by the company, it doesn't count.
Right. But they did expand what they considered benefits or healthcare costs. So that would include any group life, disability, vision, or dental insurance paid to employees. So that can be included now in payroll costs. So before it was just strictly medical health benefits. They've clarified it, they expanded, and that's retroactive to the original CARES Act. So again, Ben, if you were calculating payroll costs off of the original CARES Act, it would behoove you to take a look at the new expanded and apply it. Maybe that you can apply more expenses to the payroll.
If anybody on the call uses something like an HRA, so that employees pay their own expenses, but you're paying it, I'm actually not sure if that's included in payroll expenses or not.
Thank you.
All right. Any last questions? I think we've gone through everything that was in the chat. So if you've got a question or if I missed one in there, please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask it. So I want to thank our panelists so much for speaking with us today and helping us out with this and helping us get clear on what the new bill is. And as things change, we'll try to do this again if there are major changes again. So
Yeah, I also just want to give a call out to Larry Rines, who is a new tab owner in Bergen County. I just want to make sure that he says hello to everyone again, and because many of the people that came on board were invited by him, and I wanted to make sure that he gets a call out.
Larry, just say hi.
Thanks so much, Jane. I appreciate everyone's time, especially the three experts that we had here today. It was extraordinarily informative, and I know I've gotten a couple of DMs already that you guys were spot on and really helpful. So we totally appreciate that, and it's part of the value we like to add to the business community here by offering webinars like this. So more to come in the future, and we hope to see everyone at those. Thanks so much.
Thank you all for coming. Have a wonderful day. good luck with getting your loans forgiven and all that paperwork filled out. And hopefully it won't be too bad now that it's down to one page.
And of course, if you have any questions of actually how to do it, reach out to any one of us. We're here to help you. That's what our job is. We want to help you be successful.
And if you're not sure who to reach out to, if you just reach out to me, and I will direct the answer to the right person, whoever that may be. All right, I'll put my information in the chat, or if you respond to the Eventbrite, that comes to me as well. All right, everyone. Have a great day.
All right,
Thanks,
thank you.
everybody.
Thanks,
very much.
everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.